The face of Hannah has been found.
Echoes call from hollow halls, a voice that creeps and softly crawls. Time stands still, the air is...
On August 30, 2025, 37-year-old Rajan Montrell Lee Belt Stubblefield was pulled over near East 6th Avenue and Billings Street in Aurora, Colorado. What started as a simple traffic stop turned into a deadly encounter. Within minutes, his car had crashed. His son was pleading for calm, and body cameras were recording every second of what would become a tragic scene. 3 shots later, Rajan lay motionless on the ground, his son's cries echoing through the footage. And as disturbing as this was, it's only the beginning. These are 6 of the most disturbing videos that spread across the internet. In Aurora, Colorado, near East 6th Avenue and Billings Street, a 37-year-old black man named Rajan Montrell Lee Belt Stubblefield lost his life during a police encounter on the 30th of August, 2025. What began as a traffic stop ended in tragedy and raised critical questions about police procedures, the use of force, and the split-second decisions that can determine whether someone lives or dies. This is the story of Rajan Belt Stubblefield and the surveillance footage that documented his final moments. The incident occurred near East 6th Avenue and Billings Street in Aurora on that Saturday afternoon. An Aurora police officer initiated a traffic stop, but Belt Stubblefield did not pull over immediately. Instead, he continued driving. The encounter escalated quickly. During the traffic stop, Belt Stubblefield's vehicle crashed into 2 other vehicles that were parked on the street. What happened next would be captured on multiple forms of surveillance footage, creating a permanent and controversial record of the events. The body-worn camera footage released by the Aurora Police Department shows the officer pulling out his gun and pointing it at Belt Stubblefield while approaching him in his damaged vehicle. Belt Stubblefield eventually opened the door. According to the footage, the officer can be seen pointing his weapon directly at Belt Stubblefield as he emerged from the car. The mechanical eye of the body camera recorded everything with unflinching clarity, capturing the tension and the danger of the moment. Behind Rajan stood his 18-year-old son, a witness to everything that was about to unfold. According to the body camera footage, his son said, "Dad, chill, no, Dad," and then appealed to the officer, saying, "Officer, chill."
No, get that shit. No, Dad, chill. Get that shit. Officer, chill.
The young man was watching his father in a confrontation with a police officer who had a gun drawn. The footage captured the desperation in the son's voice, the urgency of his pleas for calm. Bystander video captured the incident from street level. According to multiple witnesses who reviewed the available footage, Belt Stubblefield appeared to be unarmed. One witness, Robert Berg, spoke to news outlets about what he saw that day. He said the officer gave Belt Stubblefield several opportunities to comply, but he added something crucial. He said, "I saw him die right in front of my eyes. It was horrible. It was the worst thing ever." Berg was there. He had witnessed the shooting. He had watched Rajan Belt Stubblefield die in the street. The flock safety surveillance video, captured by automated license plate readers and security cameras in the area, documented the incident from another angle. This footage, combined with the body-worn camera footage and the bystander videos, created a multi-dimensional record of what happened. Police Chief Todd Chamberlain said that the incident was captured on body-worn camera and flock safety surveillance videos. The mechanical witnesses had been present, recording, documenting. According to the body camera footage released by Aurora Police, the officer fired 3 shots at Belt Stubblefield. One shot was fatal, hitting him in the head. The footage showed the officer punching Rajan after he turned his back, and then firing 3 shots in rapid succession. The body camera captured the violence with brutal clarity. There was no escaping what had happened. Witnesses and civil rights advocates who reviewed the footage disputed the Aurora Police Department's narrative about what occurred. They said Belt Stubblefield was unarmed and did not pose a threat that warranted lethal force. Multiple witnesses and those who reviewed the videos said that no weapon was visible on Belt Stubblefield. One witness stated that multiple officers on the scene did not render aid to Rajan after he was shot. While the body camera showed additional officers responding to the scene after the shooting, questions remained about what immediate assistance was provided to someone who had just been shot by police. Aurora Police Chief Todd Chamberlain called the shooting tragic. and said that the officer feared for his life. Chamberlain stated that one of their officers was placed in a dangerous and fast-moving situation, and acknowledged that the community rightfully had questions. He said the officer had attempted to de-escalate the situation. However, the family of Rajon Belt Stubblefield and their civil rights attorney Ben Crump viewed the footage differently. They said the officer should have never used his gun. 2 weeks after the shooting, his family and civil rights attorneys continued to insist that the officer did not have to use lethal force. Nationally prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump pledged justice for Rajon Belt Stubblefield and his family. The family held a press conference after reviewing the body camera footage, and they addressed what they saw in the official police video. The footage that was supposed to explain and justify the shooting instead raised more questions in the minds of those who watched it. The body camera footage captured a brief, aggressive encounter between a police officer and a 37-year-old man who was already injured from a recent car accident. The officer's firearm was drawn and pointed at Belt Stubblefield from the moment he approached the damaged vehicle. The surveillance footage showed what happened in the seconds that followed, documenting the shooting that resulted in Belt Stubblefield's death. The incident in Aurora sparked broader conversations about police training, decision-making in high-stress situations, and the use of lethal force. The flock safety surveillance camera and the body-worn camera footage became the central evidence in determining whether the shooting was justified or excessive. The mechanical witnesses had recorded everything, but they could not provide the answers that the community demanded. Rajon Belt Stubblefield was shot and killed on the 30th of August, 2025. His family faces a future without him. His 18-year-old son watched his father die in the street. The surveillance footage, the body camera, and the bystander video all captured the tragedy from different angles, creating a permanent record of a moment that changed everything. The cameras were silent witnesses to a police shooting, documenting the events with mechanical precision, but unable to bring Rajon Belt Stubblefield back to life or provide the closure his family continues to seek. Before we go any further, I just want to ask you for a small favor. If you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. We recently hit 100,000 subscribers, and that's all thanks to you. Our 100K special surprise was revealed, and we had many positive responses from you. Our next goal is to hit 200K before the year ends. It feels impossible, but hey, it's free to dream, right? Also, there's a hidden word somewhere in this video for you. Let's see if you can find it. Now, back to the video. On the 29th of July, 2011, an 8-year-old boy named Leiby Kletzky left his day camp in Brooklyn, New York, with instructions to walk home alone for the first time in his life. His mother, Esther Kletzky, had decided it was time for him to gain independence. She gave him a map and walked him partway, letting him navigate the rest of the journey himself. It was meant to be a milestone moment, a small step toward growing up. Instead, it became the catalyst for one of Brooklyn's most haunting crimes, and a tragedy that would forever alter how parents thought about childhood freedom. Leiby never made it home. His disappearance triggered a desperate search that captivated the entire community, and ultimately revealed the dark reality that lurked beneath the surface of an otherwise peaceful neighborhood in Brooklyn's Borough Park section. What started as a routine walk home became a nightmare that would devastate his family and force an entire community to confront uncomfortable truths about danger and vulnerability. The search for Leiby began almost immediately after his absence was noticed. Community members flooded the streets with flyers bearing his photograph. Volunteers organized search parties that combed through neighborhoods, calling his name, hoping for any sign of the young boy. The case drew media attention as the hours turned into days, and the initial hope that Leiby might be found safe began to fade into a growing sense of dread. Hundreds of people came together in a display of collective concern, united by the fear that something terrible had happened to this child. The investigation that followed relied heavily on technology that would prove crucial in determining what happened to Leiby. Surveillance cameras positioned throughout the neighborhood became critical pieces of evidence. These silent witnesses captured moments that would help authorities reconstruct the final hours of the boy's life. The cameras showed Leiby walking through the streets, trying to find his way home. They tracked his movements as he encountered someone who would change everything. Video footage showed Leiby speaking with an older man on a street corner. The man appeared to offer help, telling the boy he would drive him home. What should have been an act of kindness became the moment that sealed Leiby's fate. The surveillance cameras captured this interaction, and these images would later become essential to understanding how Leiby had been lured away from his path. The man in the video was Levi Aaron, a 38-year-old resident of the neighborhood. What the community didn't know was that Aaron was harboring dark impulses and violent tendencies that he had managed to hide from those around him. When investigators finally identified him through the surveillance footage and brought him in for questioning, the truth began to emerge in pieces, each more horrifying than the last. Aaron confessed to the crime with a chilling matter-of-factness. He told authorities that after taking Leiby to his apartment, he had killed the boy. The details he provided were gruesome and devastating. He described placing Leiby's body in a plastic bag and disposing of it in a dumpster near his home. For days, the community had been searching desperately for the child, while his remains had been discarded like trash just blocks away from where volunteers were looking. When authorities located and recovered Leiby's remains, the confirmation of his death sent shockwaves through Brooklyn and beyond. The family's worst fears were realized, but the horror extended far beyond grief. The manner of his death and the calculated way in which Aaron had concealed the crime revealed a level of cruelty that seemed almost incomprehensible. The surveillance cameras that had documented Leiby's final movements became the foundation of the prosecution's case. These recordings were presented as irrefutable evidence of what had transpired. They showed the critical moment when Aaron approached the boy, and they became the silent testimony to how quickly a child's world could be shattered. Without this footage, the investigation would have been far more difficult. The cameras had captured the predator in action, and their recordings ensured that there could be no ambiguity about how Leiby had disappeared. Detectives and investigators spoke about the importance of the surveillance evidence in piecing together the timeline of events. The footage provided a visual narrative that corroborated witness statements and Aaron's own confessions. It established the sequence of events with clarity and removed any doubt about the chain of custody regarding the evidence. The prosecution built a case that was overwhelming in its detail and damning in its implications. Levi Aaron was convicted of second-degree murder and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The justice system had done its work, but no verdict could restore what had been lost or ease the pain of a family devastated by the murder of their youngest son. Leiby's mother, Esther Kletzky, had to live with the knowledge that the decision she made on that July morning had inadvertently placed her son in harm's way. She had to reconcile her desire to give her child independence with the horrifying reality that the world contained predators who would exploit that opportunity. In an interview after the conviction, she spoke about her grief and her struggle to understand how something so terrible could have happened. She expressed the pain of losing a child to violence and the guilt that naturally follows such a tragedy, even when a parent has acted with the best intentions. The community that had mobilized so quickly to search for Leiby was left to process the trauma of his death. A young boy who had been a member of their neighborhood, who attended their schools and synagogues, had been murdered by someone living among them. The sense of safety that had existed before was shattered. The case raised difficult questions about how well we really know our neighbors and what dangers might be hidden beneath ordinary appearances. Leiby Kletzky's death became a watershed moment in discussions about child safety and parental responsibility. It forced people to reconsider assumptions about independence and urban childhood. The tragedy did not fade from memory, but instead became a reference point for the dangers that children face and the importance of vigilance without paranoia. Today, more than a decade after his death, Leiby is remembered not just for the tragedy of how his life ended, but as a child whose brief existence prompted conversations and changes that continue to influence how families think about safety. His name remains a reminder of the fragility of childhood and the very real threats that can exist in any community, no matter how peaceful or close-knit it may appear. One of America's deadliest school shootings took place in Uvalde, Texas, on the 24th of May, 2022. What unfolded that day at Robb Elementary School would leave 19 children and 2 teachers dead, and a community shattered beyond recognition. This is the story of what happened, told through the voices of those who witnessed it and the evidence that remains. The morning started like any other Tuesday in Robb Elementary. Students sat in their classrooms, teachers prepared lessons, parents dropped their children off, trusting that their kids were safe within those walls. By noon, that trust would be violently betrayed. At 11:32 in the morning, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos crashed his truck near the school. Witnesses saw him get out, armed with an AR-15 style rifle. A teacher on the patio tried to get back inside the building and alert others, but Ramos fired at her through the glass. She was wounded but survived. Those shots would be among the first warnings of the horror to come. Ramos entered the school through a door that was propped open. He walked into the hallway and then entered a 4th grade classroom where 21 students and teacher Irma Garcia were gathered. What happened next would be captured in ways that would later haunt investigators and the nation. The police response that day is one of the most scrutinized aspects of this tragedy. Law enforcement arrived within minutes of the shooting, but the decisions made in those critical moments have sparked ongoing investigations and heartbreak. The surveillance footage from inside the school would become crucial evidence, showing the timeline of events with cold, unflinching clarity. That camera was a silent witness to everything, recording every second of the 18 to 20-minute period that Ramos spent inside the school, firing repeatedly into the classrooms. According to investigators, the surveillance system captured Ramos entering the school, entering the classroom, and firing on the children and teachers inside. The footage showed the devastation unfolding, moment by moment, frame by frame. For those who later viewed it, including law enforcement and parents, it was an almost unbearable record of what occurred. The camera did not blink. It did not turn away. It simply documented the tragedy as it happened. One of the most heartbreaking details emerged about teacher Irma Garcia, who died protecting her students. She was 48 years old and had taught at Robb Elementary for 23 years. Her husband, Ruben, passed away from a heart attack just 2 days after her death, leaving their children orphaned. Their story became emblematic of the sacrifices teachers make. The other teacher killed was Eva Morales, who was 44 years old and had taught at the school for 17 years. Both women were remembered not just as educators, but as protectors, who gave their lives in defense of their students. Among the 19 children killed, the youngest was 9 years old. The victims were Mary Jo Garza, Ileana Garcia, McKenna Elrod, Jose Manuel Flores Jr., Layla Salazar, Jaila Nicole Silguero, Tess Marie Mata, Matthew Teichman, Miranda Mathis, Uvalde Rosales Jr., Alithia Ramirez, Annabelle Rodriguez, Maite Rodriguez, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Alaya Hanna Torres, Xavier Lopez, Jacqueline Cazares, Rogelio Torres, and Kyle Yellis. They ranged in age from 9 to 11 years old. Each one had a name, a family, and hopes and dreams that would never be realized. Parents arrived at the school in the hours following the shooting, desperate to find their children. The scene outside was one of unbridled anguish. They waited for information that never came in time. Many learned their children were gone through news reports rather than official notification. The trauma of that day extended far beyond those 18 minutes of gunfire. Later investigations revealed that school resource officer Adrian Ruiz was in the building at the time of the shooting, but was not inside the classroom where Ramos was firing. This detail raised questions about coordination and response protocols that continue to be examined by lawmakers and law enforcement agencies. The surveillance cameras documented these movements as well, showing the sequence of events with precision. Uvalde is a small town in South Texas where everyone knows everyone else. The community was bound together not by choice but by shared tragedy. In the weeks and months that followed, the school, the town, and the nation grappled with the question that seemed impossible to answer. How could this have happened? How could someone walk into a place meant to nurture and protect children and commit such an act of violence? The surveillance footage served as a permanent, unchangeable record. It could not lie. It could not be reinterpreted. It simply showed what had occurred in those devastating minutes. For some, viewing it provided a pathway to understanding the timeline. For others, it was a source of profound pain that complicated their grief. In the years since 2022, the survivors, families, and community members of Uvalde have worked to process their grief while advocating for change. They have spoken out about gun violence, school safety, and the mental health crises that often precede such tragedies. Their voices continue to demand that their loss mean something. 19 children and 2 teachers were lost on May 24, 2022, in Uvalde, Texas. Their deaths were documented by a camera that saw everything and could do nothing. The surveillance system could not prevent what happened, but it remains as a testament to what we must never forget. The tragedy of Uvalde is written into the memory of this nation, a sobering reminder of the cost of inaction and the fragility of safety in places where we should be able to trust that our children are protected. The camera rolls on, seeing everything, changing nothing. But perhaps in bearing witness, it offers us a path forward, a way to ensure that the names of those 19 children and 2 teachers are never forgotten, and that their deaths might somehow inspire us to build a safer world. A 5-year-old girl named April Jones disappeared from a small village in Wales on the 1st of October 2012. Her vanishing would become one of the most haunting missing person cases in British history, leaving a community devastated and raising uncomfortable questions about safety, surveillance, and the vulnerability of our children.
She's gone off in a car with somebody. Somebody picked her up in a car or something. Okay, what's the name of the child that's gone missing? April Jones. April, how old is she? 5.
April lived in Machynlleth, a quiet rural town in mid-Wales with a population of just over 2,000 people. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other, where children played outside without constant supervision, where the dangers of the wider world seemed distant and unlikely to intrude. On that autumn evening, that sense of security would shatter. April's mother, Coral Jones, had allowed her daughter to play outside on the street near their home. It was around 7 o'clock in the evening, still light enough for a child to be outdoors, still early enough that danger seemed theoretical rather than real. Coral was inside the house when she heard screams. She ran outside to find her daughter gone. What followed was a desperate search that would captivate the nation. The initial hours were crucial. Every moment that passed without finding April increased the likelihood of a tragic outcome. Police were called immediately, and the urgency of the situation became apparent to everyone involved. A 5-year-old girl had vanished from a street in a small Welsh village, and no one knew where she was. The surveillance camera on a nearby road would become instrumental in piecing together what happened. The camera captured a white van traveling along the route near where April disappeared. The footage showed the vehicle at the critical time, around the moment April went missing. This recording became a vital piece of evidence, one of the few concrete details that could help solve the mystery of what had happened to the little girl. Within days, police identified a suspect. Mark Bridger, a 46-year-old man who lived in the area, was arrested on suspicion of abduction. He lived just a short distance from where April disappeared. He was arrested on that sunny afternoon, while walking his dog. The surveillance footage, combined with witness statements and other evidence, pointed toward him. What emerged during the investigation was deeply disturbing. Bridger initially claimed that he had hit April with his van by accident, and that she had died. He said he had panicked and disposed of her body. Despite extensive searches involving police officers, volunteers, sniffer dogs, and divers, April's body was never found. The case became a search for answers in the absence of physical remains. The surveillance system that captured the van became crucial to the prosecution's case. The footage provided a timeline and documented Bridger's movements at the time of April's disappearance. The camera saw what human witnesses could not always observe. It recorded the vehicle's presence on that dark autumn evening, creating an objective record of events that could not be disputed or misremembered. Coral Jones, April's mother, faced the unimaginable nightmare of her child vanishing. In interviews and statements, she spoke about that evening with the raw pain of a parent whose worst fear had materialized. She described allowing April to play outside, a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She spoke about hearing her daughter's screams and running outside to find her gone. The guilt, the anguish, the desperate hope that April might somehow still be found, all came through in her words. The case attracted significant media attention. Photographs of April's smiling face were circulated across Wales and beyond. She was 5 years old, blonde-haired, with a brightness in her eyes that made her seem both fragile and full of potential. The thought that such a young child could simply vanish on an ordinary evening struck at something fundamental in people's sense of safety. As the investigation progressed, Mark Bridger's story became increasingly implausible. He had initially claimed the death was an accident, but the evidence suggested something far more sinister. Bridger was a man with previous convictions and concerning behavior. He had accessed child abuse material online and had shown disturbing interest in children. The convergence of his proximity to where April disappeared, the surveillance footage of the van, and his own admissions pointed toward a darker reality. Bridger eventually pleaded guilty to abduction and manslaughter. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 30 years. However, the sentence provided little comfort to Coral Jones and April's family. The question of what exactly happened to April, and where her body was located, remained unanswered. The lack of closure, the absence of remains to bury, left an open wound in the family's grief. The surveillance camera footage became part of the permanent record of this case. It was evidence presented in court, viewed by jurors, and discussed extensively in the media. The footage could not tell the complete story of what had happened to April, but it provided an essential piece of the puzzle. It showed the van, it showed the timing, and it helped establish the events of that evening with as much clarity as the mechanical eye of a camera could provide. The case raised broader questions about child safety in rural communities. Despite living in a small village where one might expect increased vigilance and community protection, April had been vulnerable to someone living within that same community. The surveillance system that captured the van was one of the few safeguards, a technological witness to events that might otherwise have remained hidden. Years after April's disappearance, her case continues to be remembered. Appeals have been made to Mark Bridger to reveal the location of April's body, but he has maintained his silence. The surveillance footage remains as a permanent record of that evening, documenting the van's movement, but unable to answer the deepest questions about what happened to the little girl who climbed into it. April Jones would be 17 years old now, if she were alive. Instead, she remains frozen in time, remembered as she was on the 1st of October 2012. The surveillance camera that captured the van that evening is a silent chronicle of a moment that changed everything. It recorded the last movements of April's abductor, the final moments before a life was irrevocably altered. The footage could not save her, but it has remained as evidence, as testimony, and as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can emerge in even the quietest communities. April's case stands as a tragic testament to the fragility of childhood and the importance of vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable among us. An 18-year-old British-born American student named Hannah Graham disappeared from Charlottesville, Virginia on the 13th of September, 2014. She was a second-year student at the University of Virginia, making straight A's and living what her parents described as a precious life full of promise. Within 5 weeks, her remains would be discovered on an abandoned property, and a predator would be identified and brought to justice. This is the story of Hannah Graham and the surveillance footage that became crucial in solving her murder. Hannah was born on the 25th of February, 1996. She was described by those who knew her as intelligent, kind, and full of potential. Her parents, John and Susan Graham, released a statement saying that Hannah was beyond precious to them. On the night of September 12th, she had gone out to bars in downtown Charlottesville with friends. It would be one of the last nights of her life.
No trace of Hannah has been found since she disappeared in the early hours of Saturday, September the 13th, now more than 3 weeks ago. Somebody listening to me today.
At 1:20 in the morning, on September 13th, Hannah sent a text message to friends. She told them she had left one party and was headed to another, but she was lost and unsure of her location. It was a message that seemed innocent enough, a student navigating the downtown area of a college town in the early morning hours. The message would take on a much darker meaning in the hours to come. What happened next was documented by the silent witness of downtown surveillance cameras. The footage captured Hannah at Tempo Restaurant with a man identified as Jesse Leroy, Matthew Jr. The surveillance video showed the two of them walking together at 1:18 in the morning, just minutes before Hannah sent her confused text to friends. According to the documents, Matthew and Graham were captured on surveillance footage walking arm in arm past the red pump. The footage showed Matthew pausing for approximately 10 seconds. It remained unclear whether Hannah paused as well, but the video continued to roll, documenting their movements with cold, unflinching clarity. In an enhanced version of the surveillance footage taken 2 minutes later, police identified the two walking together. Matthew had his arm around Hannah's waist. These were the last images of Hannah Graham alive. The video captured her in her final hours, unaware that she would never leave downtown Charlottesville again. The surveillance system became the most compelling evidence in the case, a mechanical witness to the moments that would determine her fate. A witness who was present at one of the bars that night later told investigators something chilling. She said that Matthew looked at her in a crazy way after he had grabbed her leg. She had told him not to touch her, but his response troubled her deeply. This same witness observed Matthew and Hannah together in the bar. According to the documents, a witness said that Matthew was seen holding an arm around Graham and that she looked drunk. More disturbingly, the last witness to see Graham alive said that she was with a man who did not look friendly. One witness would later tell a friend something that revealed the danger she sensed. She said, "He's gonna fire her up." The surveillance footage continued its mechanical recording as events unfolded. It showed Hannah walking near Sal's Pizza in the early morning hours. Investigators would meticulously review the footage, collecting evidence of her movements on the night of September 12th into September 13th. The footage revealed Hannah walking alone at times, appearing disoriented. Then, Matthew reappeared, and the camera captured them together. This documentation would become essential to understanding the timeline of her disappearance. The last witness to see Hannah said she was standing by a vehicle identified as Matthew's orange 1998 Chrysler. According to court documents, Hannah had refused to get into the vehicle. She had resisted. She had known something was wrong, but she disappeared that night, and Jesse Matthew drove away in his orange Chrysler. Jesse Matthew Jr. was 32 years old when he encountered Hannah Graham. Investigators would later discover that Matthew had a history of violent behavior toward women. A criminal incident information report was released by Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, pointing to a sexual assault allegedly involving Matthew on September 7, 2013. Matthew had told authorities that the woman consented. There were no witnesses to what occurred that night either. Matthew fled Charlottesville after Hannah disappeared. He was arrested 11 days later in Galveston, Texas. Police said surveillance video showed Graham was last seen with Jesse Leroy, Matthew Jr. of Charlottesville. His attorney Jim Camblos confirmed that he received indictments, but Matthew initially pleaded not guilty. The evidence, however, was overwhelming. 35 days after Hannah Graham disappeared, her remains were discovered on an abandoned property in nearby Albemarle County. The location was approximately 6 miles from where other victims of Matthew's violence had been found. The discovery confirmed the worst fears of Hannah's family and the people who loved her. An 18-year-old girl with straight A's, with a whole life ahead of her, had been murdered. Jesse Matthew eventually pleaded guilty to murdering Hannah Graham. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was also found guilty and given 3 additional life sentences for other previous crimes. The surveillance footage that had documented Hannah's last hours played a crucial role in securing the conviction. The images of her walking arm in arm with Matthew, of her appearing disoriented, of her standing by the orange Chrysler, all became part of the permanent record of justice. Hannah Graham's parents said that she would have changed the world. In a tragic way, she did. Hannah enabled law enforcement to apprehend a serial rapist and murderer who had been hiding in plain sight in Charlottesville for years. The surveillance cameras that captured her final hours became the voice that Hannah herself could not speak. They documented the predator's movements and helped ensure that Jesse Matthew could never harm another woman again. The Hannah Graham Memorial Softball Tournament was established to raise money for charities and increase awareness to help protect children from predators. Research supported by the World Bank was undertaken to identify measures to address violence against women and girls. Hannah's legacy transformed from a tragedy into a call to action, a way to protect others from the fate she suffered. The surveillance footage of Hannah Graham remains as a testament to what was lost. It shows a young woman in her final hours, captured by cameras that could only record but could not intervene. The footage could not save her life, but it helped bring her killer to justice and ensured that his crimes would not go unanswered. Hannah Graham's name lives on, and the surveillance footage that documented her last night remains as evidence that even in darkness, there are those who bear witness and demand accountability. A 22-year-old man named David Copeland carried out a campaign of violence that would shake London to its core. In the spring of 1999, he planted 3 homemade nail bombs in different parts of the city, targeting the Black, Bangladeshi, and gay communities. His goal was to incite racial and homophobic violence, to tear apart the fabric of London's diverse neighborhoods. Instead, his actions would unite the city in grief and defiance.
He wanted people to associate him as being a mass murderer.
This is the story of the London nail bombings and the surveillance footage that helped end the terror. On the 17th of April, 1999, the first bomb detonated in Brixton, one of London's most prominent black communities. The explosion occurred just before 5:30 in the afternoon on Electric Avenue. Concerned traders saw something suspicious and called the police immediately. The officers were still arriving at the scene when the bomb went off at 5:25. The blast was devastating. 48 people were injured, many of them seriously. The nails that Copeland had packed around the bomb were 4 inches long. They tore through bodies in all directions, embedding themselves in flesh, causing injuries that would leave permanent scars on survivors and on the community itself. The second bomb was planted just a week later on the 24th of April. This time, Copeland targeted Brick Lane, in the heart of London's Bangladeshi community. The bomb exploded at 6 o'clock in the evening. 13 people were injured in the blast. The pattern was becoming clear to investigators. Someone was deliberately targeting specific communities, trying to inflame tensions between different groups in London. 12 days after the Brixton bombing, on the 29th of April, the Metropolitan Police Anti-Terrorist Branch made a crucial decision. They released CCTV footage from the Brixton attack, publicly identifying a young white man as their prime suspect. The surveillance footage showed Copeland moving through the streets of Brixton. The camera had captured him, documented his presence, recorded his movements. He was now known to the world. His image was broadcast on television and printed in newspapers. The surveillance system had become his nemesis, the mechanical witness that could not be deceived or evaded. But the release of the CCTV footage had an immediate and unexpected consequence. Copeland realized he was being hunted. He knew his face was now known to the police and the public. The footage changed everything. He decided to abandon his carefully laid plans and strike immediately with his third and final bomb. He moved forward the Admiral Duncan pub bombing from a date several weeks away to the very next evening. On the 30th of April, just 24 hours after his image was released to the public, Copeland walked into the Admiral Duncan pub in the heart of Soho's gay community. The pub was busy that evening, filled with people enjoying Friday night drinks. Inside, a group of friends sat together, unaware that someone had just placed a bag under one of the tables. Bar patron Jonathan Cash recalled seeing an unattended bag. He remembered accidentally touching it, not realizing what it contained. The bag was a bomb, packed with the same 4-inch nails that had devastated communities across London. At 6:37 in the evening, the explosion tore through the pub. The blast was more powerful than the previous two bombings. The nails embedded themselves in walls, in furniture, and in the bodies of everyone nearby. 3 people were killed instantly. Andrea Dykes was 27 years old and pregnant. John Light was 32. Nick Moore was 31. They died in the explosion at the Admiral Duncan. More than 80 people were injured in the blast. 4 of the injured subsequently lost limbs. Among the casualties was a 1-year-old boy who ended up with a 4-inch nail lodged in his skull. He survived, but he would carry that wound for the rest of his life. The surveillance footage from the Admiral Duncan proved crucial. The CCTV footage captured Copeland carrying the bomb through Soho before the attack. The public release of the footage had already led to tips from the public. Paul Mifsud, a work colleague of Copeland, had recognized him from the image that was broadcast on the 29th of April. The surveillance video of Copeland in Soho provided additional confirmation. Police now had multiple pieces of evidence pointing to the same man. Copeland was arrested shortly after the third bombing. The CCTV footage, combined with the witness identification from Paul Mifsud and other evidence gathered during the investigation, provided an overwhelming case against him. He was a 22-year-old engineer's assistant from Hampshire who had been radicalized by far-right extremist ideology. His apartment contained materials related to white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups. He had carefully planned these bombings as a way to incite violence between different communities. Copeland eventually pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term that would keep him locked away for decades. The sentence brought no comfort to the families who had lost loved ones, to the survivors who carried physical and psychological scars, or to the communities that had been targeted. The damage was done. The violence had been inflicted. The surveillance footage had captured everything, but it could not undo what had been done. The CCTV footage remains as a permanent record of the London nail bombings. It shows Copeland in the streets of Brixton, in the alleys of Soho, carrying his instruments of terror. The footage could not prevent the attacks, but it provided the evidence that led to his capture. It was the mechanical witness that the police relied on to identify and apprehend a dangerous predator before he could strike again. The aftermath of the bombings brought an unexpected outcome. Copeland had hoped to incite division and violence between communities. Instead, the people of London responded with unity. The Brixton community, the Bangladeshi community, and the gay community came together in their grief and their defiance. Memorials were established. Survivors began the long process of healing. The bombing of the Admiral Duncan became a rallying point for the gay community's resilience and determination not to be intimidated by hatred and violence. 3 people died in the London nail bombings. Over 100 people were injured. A 1-year-old boy will carry the memory of a 4-inch nail in his skull for the rest of his life. David Copeland sits in prison, his attempts to incite violence having failed. The surveillance footage that captured him in the act of planning and executing his attacks remains as evidence of his crimes and as a reminder of what happened in the spring of 1999. The CCTV cameras were silent witnesses to terror, but they were also the voices that helped bring a murderer to justice. They recorded the darkest moments of London's recent history, ensuring that what happened would never be forgotten and that the person responsible would never escape accountability. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this video informative, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what we drop next. We cover stories like this almost every day, and trust me, you don't want to be left behind. If you can't wait until the next upload, there are more videos popping up on your screen in just a few seconds. Click one and keep watching. Until then, take care. I'm out.